What would you do if the person you trusted most in your own home shattered your world in the most unthinkable way? Today, we share Clara's story, the billionaire's wife, a tale that reminds us that sometimes the greatest betrayals come from those closest to us, but also that the human spirit's capacity to heal and seek justice knows no bounds. Welcome to Stories of Courage, where we illuminate the darkest moments that lead to the brightest transformations. I'm your host, and today we journey with Clara Martinez, a billionaire's wife whose life changed forever in ways she never could have imagined. This is not just a story of trauma, but one of incredible strength, the pursuit of justice, and the power of human resilience. Clara Martinez lived what many would consider a fairy tale life. At 32, she was married to Ricardo Martinez, one of New York's most successful tech entrepreneurs. Their penthouse on the Upper East Side overlooked Central Park, and their life together seemed perfect from the outside. But as we often learn, the most beautiful facades can hide the most painful truths. Clara had been trying to conceive for 3 years. Month after month, pregnancy tests came back negative. The strain was beginning to show in their marriage. Ricardo's business required frequent travel, sometimes for weeks at a time. Clara had grown accustomed to the solitude, finding comfort in her art studio within their home, and the reliable presence of their small household staff. Among the staff was Marcus Chen, 38, who had worked as their household manager for 2 years. Quiet, efficient, and seemingly trustworthy, he managed everything from security to daily maintenance. Clara barely noticed him. He was simply part of the background of her privileged life. In late September, Ricardo departed for what would be his longest business trip yet, 6 weeks across Asia to finalize several major deals. Clara kissed him goodbye at their private car, watching his Tesla disappear into the Manhattan traffic. "I'll miss you every day," she had whispered in his ear. "Call me every evening." Ricardo promised he would, and for the first week, he kept that promise faithfully. Clara settled into her routine. Mornings in her art studio, afternoons walking through Central Park, evenings reading or video calling Ricardo. The penthouse felt larger when he was gone, but she had grown comfortable with her own company. Marcus maintained his usual schedule, arriving early each morning, handling deliveries, coordinating with building maintenance, ensuring security systems were functioning. He was professional, almost invisible in his efficiency. But Clara began to notice small things. Her evening tea tasted slightly different some nights. She felt unusually drowsy after dinner on several occasions, chalking it up to stress and her husband's absence. Just tired from missing Ricardo, she would tell herself, never suspecting that someone she trusted implicitly was methodically planning the unthinkable. It happened on a Thursday night in early October. Ricardo's calls had become less frequent due to his overwhelming schedule. Clara had spent the day painting, losing herself in colors and brushstrokes that seemed to express emotions she couldn't quite name. Marcus had prepared her usual evening tea, chamomile with honey, something that had become a comforting routine. But this time, the tea contained something else, something that would steal her consciousness and her choice. Clara remembered feeling dizzy after finishing her tea. She remembered trying to walk to her bedroom and feeling the world become fuzzy around the edges. She remembered thinking she should call Ricardo, but her phone felt impossibly heavy in her hands. What happened next would remain largely blocked from her memory, her mind's way of protecting her from trauma too devastating to fully recall. But the physical evidence would later tell a story that would shatter her world. Clara woke up the next morning in her own bed, fully clothed but disheveled, with no clear memory of how she had gotten there. She felt strange, disoriented, with a persistent headache and an inexplicable sense that something was terribly wrong. Marcus appeared that morning as usual, professional and efficient. "Good morning, Mrs. Martinez. I hope you slept well. Your breakfast is ready whenever you'd like." His manner was exactly the same as always, calm, respectful, showing no sign of the monstrous violation he had committed. 3 weeks passed. Clara's strange symptoms persisted: nausea in the mornings, unusual fatigue, emotional sensitivity that seemed beyond her normal stress about Ricardo's extended absence. She attributed everything to worry and loneliness. It was Dr. Sarah Kim, Clara's longtime physician, who suggested the pregnancy test during what Clara thought was a routine checkup for her persistent symptoms. "Clara, when was your last menstrual period?" Dr. Kim asked gently. As Clara calculated, her eyes widened with realization. Could it be possible? After 3 years of trying, could this finally be happening? The blood test results came back 2 days later. Positive. Clara was 6 weeks pregnant. Her first instinct was pure joy. She called Ricardo immediately, despite the time difference. His voice crackled through the international connection, filled with excitement and disbelief. "Are you serious? Clara, this is incredible. After all this time." Ricardo's happiness was infectious. They spent an hour planning their future, nursery designs, baby names, how they would tell their families. But as Clara hung up, a nagging feeling crept into her consciousness. She tried to remember the night of conception. With Ricardo's travel schedule, their intimate moments had been carefully planned around his brief returns home. She pulled out her calendar and began calculating dates. Ricardo had been gone for over 7 weeks. Their last intimate encounter had been nearly 8 weeks ago, but she was only 6 weeks pregnant. The math didn't add up. A cold dread began to settle in her stomach.
Claire's mind raced through possibilities, each one more disturbing than the last. Could the doctors be wrong about the timing? Could pregnancy dating be that inaccurate? She desperately wanted to believe there was an innocent explanation. She called Dr. Kim and requested the most precise dating possible. An ultrasound appointment was scheduled for the following day. That night, Clara lay awake staring at the ceiling of her bedroom. Everything felt different now. The apartment that had been her sanctuary now felt somehow violated. She found herself looking at Marcus differently when he came in to check the security system. The ultrasound confirmed her worst fears. Based on fetal development, conception had occurred approximately 6.5 weeks ago, precisely during the time Ricardo was in Singapore, thousands of miles away. Dr. Kim's voice was gentle but direct. "Clara, I need to ask you some difficult questions. Is there any possibility, any chance that you had relations with someone else during that time period?" Clara's world tilted. "No, absolutely not. I would never. I love my husband. There has to be another explanation." But even as she said it, fragments of that strange night began emerging from her subconscious. The drowsiness, the disorientation, waking up confused and disheveled. Dr. Kim's expression grew more serious. "Clara, I want you to think very carefully. Have there been any instances where you felt unusually tired or disoriented? Any gaps in your memory? Any morning where you felt different but couldn't explain why?" The pieces began falling into place like a horrific puzzle. The strange-tasting tea, the unusual drowsiness, Marcus's constant presence, the morning she woke up feeling violated but couldn't understand why. I think someone may have drugged me, Clara whispered, the words feeling surreal as they left her mouth. Dr. Kim immediately recommended that Clara contact the police and consider a rape kit, though she explained that after 6 weeks, physical evidence would likely be minimal. She also referred Clara to a specialist counselor experienced in sexual assault cases. Clara's hands shook as she left the medical office. Everything felt surreal, like she was watching someone else's nightmare unfold. She sat in her car for 20 minutes, unable to start the engine, processing the magnitude of what might have happened. Her first instinct was to call Ricardo, but something stopped her. How could she explain this over a phone call? How could she destroy their joy about the pregnancy with such devastating news? And what if she was wrong? Instead, she drove to her sister Maria's apartment in Brooklyn. Maria took one look at Clara's face and knew something was terribly wrong. "Clara, what's happened? You look like you've seen a ghost." Maria guided her sister to the couch and made tea, waiting patiently for Clara to find her words. When Clara finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Maria, I'm pregnant, but Ricardo couldn't be the father. And I think someone in our household may have assaulted me." Maria's face went through a range of emotions: shock, horror, protective anger. "Oh my God, Clara, we need to call the police immediately, and you need to get out of that apartment until we figure out what happened." Together, they contacted Detective Jennifer Walsh, who specialized in sexual assault cases. Detective Walsh was compassionate but direct. After 6 weeks, gathering evidence would be challenging but not impossible. "We'll need to interview all household staff, review security footage if available, and conduct a thorough investigation of your home," Detective Walsh explained. "But first, we need to ensure your immediate safety."
Over the following days, the investigation took on a relentless pace, each hour stretching into a battle between truth and concealment. The penthouse that had once been Clara's sanctuary was now a crime scene, buzzing with quiet intensity. Detectives came and went. Technicians in gloves dusted surfaces and collected samples, while Clara stood aside, watching strangers in her home search for pieces of a puzzle that would either confirm her worst fears or, impossibly, reveal some other explanation. The first step was reviewing the building's security footage. Detective Jennifer Walsh, meticulous as always, sat with her team in a dimly lit evidence room, the flickering monitor casting harsh shadows on their faces. For hours, they scrubbed through footage from the lobby, elevators, and hallways, every angle the building's common area cameras had recorded. They watched Marcus arrive punctually each morning, carrying his worn leather satchel, nodding politely to the doorman. They saw him enter the penthouse floor elevator, swipe the household key card, and vanish behind the private doors. Nothing outwardly suspicious, nothing overtly criminal. And yet, it was what they did not see that raised red flags. The penthouse itself, one of the most secure residences in the Upper East Side, had an elaborate internal camera system, installed not only for theft prevention but also as part of Ricardo's obsession with safety. Those cameras should have captured every movement, every interaction inside the apartment. But during the exact window when Clara believed she had been drugged and assaulted, the feeds had mysteriously gone offline. Walsh leaned forward, her sharp eyes narrowing at the digital log. The outage wasn't random, it wasn't a glitch, it was intentional. Someone with knowledge of the system had disabled the cameras for a stretch of 6 hours on that Thursday night. And then, just as strangely, the system had come back online before dawn, operating flawlessly as though nothing had ever happened. "Convenient," Walsh muttered, tapping her pen against the desk. Her voice carried both disdain and certainty. Turning to Clara, she explained in measured tones, "In my experience, predators who plan something this specific often understand surveillance better than most. Marcus managed your household, correct? That means he knew the codes, the resets, the bypasses. He wouldn't need to break in. He was already trusted."
The words chilled Clara. She replayed Marcus's calm, almost robotic politeness, his constant presence in her home. She remembered how invisible he always seemed, slipping quietly through rooms, never drawing attention. It now seemed clear his invisibility had been deliberate, a cultivated skill. Meanwhile, the forensic analysis moved forward. The kitchen counter was swabbed, the honey jar sealed and bagged, and the ceramic teacups Clara used that night were collected, even the chipped one she had insisted on keeping because it was her favorite. Days later, the results came back. Hidden inside the sweet golden syrup of the honey were traces of zolpidem, a potent sedative better known by its clinical name, but commonly referred to as a sleeping pill. In small doses, it induced drowsiness. In larger, it caused memory blackouts, confusion, and total incapacitation. The kind of drug a predator might use to erase a victim's ability to resist, or even to remember. Walsh explained the findings carefully. This wasn't carelessness, it was precision. Whoever did this knew the right dose to keep you unconscious and disoriented, without risking immediate suspicion. Clara felt a hollow ache in her chest. To think that each night she had sipped her tea, unaware that her trust in a household ritual was being weaponized against her, made her stomach twist. Even more damning was the medical evidence. The weeks had passed, Clara's blood still showed metabolites consistent with heavy exposure to sleep-inducing medication. She had no prescription, no medical reason for such a drug to be in her system. It was proof, scientific and undeniable, that she had been drugged repeatedly. But Walsh wasn't finished. Her cyber team conducted a forensic sweep of the apartment's shared computer, the one Marcus often used to manage schedules, deliveries, and security settings. Buried beneath layers of deleted files, they unearthed a chilling digital trail. Searches on female fertility cycles, pregnancy dating, and the likelihood of conception under various circumstances. The searches had been conducted late at night, during Ricardo's absence. Someone had tried to erase them, but the digital fingerprints remained. "Not only did he drug you," Walsh said gravely, "but he was preparing for the consequences. This wasn't an impulsive act, it was planned." The final, most shattering piece of evidence came from a place Clara least expected: her laundry hamper. On the night she awoke disoriented and confused, she had instinctively left her nightgown unwashed, though she hadn't known why. That decision, born from some subconscious need to preserve a piece of her confusion, became the turning point. Forensic specialists extracted genetic material from the delicate fabric, preserved despite the passing weeks. The results matched Marcus Chen. When Walsh entered the interrogation room with the evidence folder, Marcus sat calmly at the table, his hands folded neatly, his expression unreadable. For hours, he had maintained his innocence, speaking in measured tones about loyalty, respect, and shock at the accusations. But when Walsh slid the DNA report across the table, along with photos of the recovered search history and toxicology results, something in his face cracked. His eyes darted toward the evidence, then downward, and his composure wavered. The silence in the room stretched like a taut wire. Then, finally, his voice broke the stillness, low and hollow. "I never meant for it to go this far. She was always so perfect, so far above me. I knew I could never have her. Not really. Not in the light. I thought if I was careful, if I kept her quiet, no one would ever know." His words turned darker, more chilling. The tea made her soft, peaceful, like she wasn't fighting. It was the only way. I didn't mean for her to get pregnant. That wasn't supposed to happen. Walsh didn't flinch. She pressed the record button on the small device in front of her. "Say it clearly, Marcus. What did you do to Mrs. Martinez?" His jaw tightened, his voice flat now, stripped of all pretense. "I drugged her tea. I waited until she was unconscious, and then I took what I wanted." The confession, cold and deliberate, sent a wave of nausea through Clara when Walsh later played the recording for her. The violation she had suspected was now confirmed in chilling clarity. There was no more room for doubt, no lingering questions. Her instincts were right. Marcus, the man she had passed in hallways, the man who had quietly managed her home, the man she had trusted implicitly, had committed the unforgivable. The relief of knowing the truth was laced with devastation. Closure had come, but it was jagged and cruel, reopening wounds Clara didn't even realize existed. Her trust in the world had been fractured, her sense of safety permanently altered. She stared out the window of her sister's apartment that night, New York skyline glittering indifferently in the distance, and whispered to herself, "Someone I trusted destroyed everything, but he did not destroy me."
With Marcus in custody and his chilling confession preserved on record, Clara felt a strange mixture of relief and dread. The truth was out, but the consequences were only just beginning. She could no longer postpone the most agonizing conversation of her life. Ricardo was still in Asia, his return scheduled for the following week, but Clara knew she could not allow him to learn the truth secondhand, or worse, through the media. This was a wound that needed to be revealed by her, no matter how much it broke her heart. She spent the entire day rehearsing, words scribbled in her journal, then crossed out, sentences whispered aloud in front of the mirror, her voice cracking every time she reached the part about the baby. She tried to imagine Ricardo's face, his reaction, anger, disbelief, maybe even rejection. Her stomach churned with fear. Would this revelation tear apart the fragile hope they had clung to for years? Would he see her differently? Would he see the baby differently? Finally, as dusk settled over Manhattan and the city lights began to glow against the skyline, Clara opened her laptop. She arranged the call for his morning, her evening, knowing he would be in his hotel room before another exhausting day of meetings. Her hands trembled as she typed the connection code. The familiar chime of the video link felt deafening in the silence of her apartment. When Ricardo's face appeared on the screen, Clara's breath caught in her throat. He looked tired, his hair slightly tousled, the lines of responsibility etched deeper into his features, but his eyes softened the moment they landed on her. "Clara, you look exhausted. Are you feeling all right?" His voice was warm, laced with concern, and even through the screen, his love was palpable. Yet that love only deepened the knife twisting inside her chest. She opened her mouth, but the words she had practiced dissolved instantly. Tears stung her eyes. "Ricardo, I need to tell you something. It's going to be very hard to hear." He leaned forward, his expression tightening with worry. "What is it? You're scaring me." Clara gripped the edge of her desk, grounding herself. "I'm pregnant," she began, her voice trembling. "And at first, I celebrated it with you. We both did. But..." She paused, the silence stretching unbearably between them. "The timing is wrong. You couldn't be the father." For a heartbeat, Ricardo simply stared at her, his face unreadable. The digital connection carried his silence across thousands of miles, pressing heavily on Clara's chest. Finally, his voice came, strained and low. "What do you mean the timing is wrong? Clara, what are you telling me?" Her tears broke free, rolling down her cheeks. "While you were away, someone drugged me. I was unconscious. I didn't even realize what had happened until the pregnancy dates didn't add up. Marcus has been arrested. He confessed." Ricardo's face contorted, emotions colliding in real time. Disbelief, horror, rage, heartbreak. His hands clenched into fists, then released. His jaw tightened as if he were forcing himself not to shout. Marcus? Our household manager? He raped you? Clara could barely nod, her sobs making her words fragile. I'm so sorry, Ricardo. I know this destroys everything we were happy about. I know this complicates our marriage, our future. I don't know what we're going to do. But what happened next startled her. Instead of anger directed at her, Ricardo's voice cut through the storm with unexpected steadiness. Clara, stop. Don't apologize. This is not your fault. You hear me? This is not your fault. You were the victim of a horrible crime. The guilt does not belong to you. It belongs to him, and he will pay for what he's done. Clara shook her head, choking on the words. But the baby, she whispered. This baby isn't yours. It's the result of rape. How can we possibly move forward? Ricardo's face softened, though his eyes still burned with a mixture of fury and sorrow. Clara, we will face this together. The child, whatever its origins, does not erase who you are, does not erase what we have. It doesn't change my love for you. Biology does not define our family, our choices, our love, our strength, will. The intensity of his conviction stunned her. For the first time since the nightmare began, Clara felt a sliver of hope piercing through the suffocating darkness. Yet the road ahead loomed uncertain, heavy with choices that neither of them yet knew how to make.
Ricardo did not hesitate. The moment Clara's words sank into his soul during their video call, he abandoned boardrooms, billion-dollar deals, and the carefully structured itinerary that had consumed his life. None of it mattered anymore. His wife mattered. Her pain mattered. The child, complicated as it was, mattered. He booked the first available flight back to New York, his mind racing through every possible nightmare, his heart aching for the woman he loved. When he finally walked through the apartment door, the reality of their situation hit him harder than any corporate battle ever had. Clara, pale and trembling, stood frozen for a heartbeat before she collapsed into his arms. What followed was a tidal wave of emotion: grief for what had been taken from her, relief that she was no longer alone, fear for the uncertain path ahead, and love so fierce it threatened to consume them both. Clara clung to him as though he were her only anchor in a storm that had nearly drowned her. Ricardo held her tightly, whispering over and over, "You're safe now. I'm here. I will never let you go through this alone." But even as their embrace stitched together the first threads of healing, a heavier challenge loomed: the pregnancy. The life growing inside Clara was both a miracle she had prayed for and a reminder of a night she wished she could erase. Together, they sat with Dr. Sarah Kim and a counselor specializing in sexual trauma. The sterile office was softened by warm lighting and gentle voices, yet the weight of the conversation pressed down like iron. "You have options," Dr. Kim explained gently, her voice steady and compassionate. "Pregnancy resulting from sexual assault is an incredibly complex trauma. There is no right or wrong path. Whatever decision you make, we will support you completely. What matters most is your emotional and physical well-being." Clara stared at her hands, twisting them in her lap. The war inside her raged with no clear victor. Part of her recoiled at the thought of carrying Marcus's child, his violation manifested in flesh and blood. But another part, the part that had endured 3 painful years of negative tests, dashed hopes, and endless tears, couldn't ignore the miracle she had longed for. The first time she saw that positive result, she had wept with joy. Could she sever that joy now, knowing what she knew? I keep thinking about how happy we were when we first learned. For those few days before the truth came crashing down, this baby was everything we dreamed of, our future, our answered prayer. Can I separate the child from the horror of how it was conceived? Ricardo tightened his grip on her trembling hands. His voice was resolute, filled with the unwavering devotion that had carried them through every storm. If you choose to continue, I will love this child as my own. If you cannot, I will hold you through that decision too. You are not alone in this, not for a single second. The words broke something inside Clara. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could survive this. Weeks turned into months of soul-searching. Therapy sessions peeled back layers of grief and guilt, revealing wounds that bled, but also scars that proved survival. Clara wept in counseling, confessed her darkest fears, and questioned her worth. And through it all, Ricardo never faltered. He became her shield, her advocate, her quiet strength when she was too fragile to stand. Finally, after countless sleepless nights and whispered prayers, Clara spoke her truth. I want to continue the pregnancy. This child didn't choose how it came into existence. Why should I punish it for the evil of another? Maybe something beautiful can grow from something so horrible. Ricardo's eyes glistened with tears, his voice thick with emotion. Then we will prepare for our child together. Biology doesn't make a father, love and commitment do. This baby will know nothing but love from us, Clara. That is my promise to you both. The months that followed were grueling, yet transformative. Clara attended therapy twice a week, confronting memories she had once buried, learning to reclaim her power, while her body prepared for motherhood. Ricardo, true to his word, took extended leave from work, refusing to miss a single doctor's appointment. When the city apartment grew suffocating with memories of betrayal, they made the bold choice to move. A new apartment filled with sunlight and untainted walls became their sanctuary, a place to build hope instead of reliving fear. Meanwhile, Marcus faced the full weight of justice. His trial was swift, the evidence undeniable. At sentencing, Clara stood before the courtroom, her voice trembling but steady enough to pierce every heart present. You stole my sense of safety, my trust, and my choice, but you did not steal my strength, my capacity for love, or my future. I refuse to be defined by what you did to me. The courtroom was silent, many wiping tears, as her words echoed with a power greater than vengeance. It was the power of survival. Marcus was sentenced to 15 years in prison, but for Clara, the true victory was not his imprisonment. It was the reclamation of her voice, her dignity, and her future. As she walked out of that courtroom, Ricardo's hand in hers and the gentle swell of life growing within her, Clara knew one thing for certain. Marcus had tried to destroy her, but instead, he had wakened a strength she never knew she had. And with Ricardo beside her, she would turn that strength into love. For herself, for her child, and for the life that lay ahead.
8 months after that terrible discovery, the storm clouds that had once suffocated Clara's life finally gave way to a moment of breathtaking light. In the quiet sterility of a hospital delivery room, cries of new life broke through the air. Clara, exhausted but radiant, gazed at the tiny miracle placed in her arms. Sofia Maria Martinez. She was a beautiful, healthy baby girl with Clara's dark, soulful eyes and a delicate face that seemed to radiate serenity, as if she had been born carrying peace in her spirit. Clara wept, not just from the pain of labor or the release of months of fear, but from the overwhelming collision of love and grief. This child, conceived in violence, was now the embodiment of innocence, hope, and renewal. When Ricardo stepped forward and held Sophia for the very first time, every lingering shadow of doubt vanished. His hands trembled as he cradled her against his chest, his breath catching in awe. Tears slid silently down his cheeks as he whispered, voice breaking with emotion, "She's perfect. She's ours, completely and forever." In that sacred moment, biology lost all significance. What mattered was the love that filled the room, the choice to embrace this child not as a symbol of trauma, but as a promise of redemption. Ricardo's heart, once hardened by rage and sorrow, now beat with fierce protectiveness and tenderness. He was no longer just Clara's husband. He was Sophia's father. But the path to healing was not a straight line. After Sophia's birth, Clara embarked on another chapter of her recovery. Postpartum therapy became her lifeline, a safe space to untangle the knots of conflicting emotions that haunted her. Some days, she cradled her daughter and felt nothing but joy, a sense of triumph over darkness. Other days, guilt gnawed at her. She confessed these feelings softly in therapy sessions. "Sometimes," she admitted to her counselor 6 months after Sophia's birth, "I look at her and all I see is love, purity, and joy. And then there are moments when I remember how she was conceived, and guilt crashes over me. Guilt for loving her so much, guilt for feeling happy when her very existence began in violence." The counselor listened with empathy, her words steady and reassuring. "Clara, love and trauma can coexist. One does not cancel the other. The fact that you are able to love Sophia despite the pain of her conception speaks not of weakness, but of extraordinary strength. You are teaching her and yourself that beauty can rise from brokenness." Those words became a mantra for Clara. Slowly, she released the shame and embraced the truth. Sophia was not Marcus's legacy. She was Clara's miracle. She was Ricardo's daughter. She was love incarnate. 2 years later, Clara transformed her pain into purpose. She launched the Sophia Foundation for Survivors, named in honor of the daughter who had given her courage to dream again. Its mission was clear: to support women who had experienced sexual assault, especially those facing the harrowing complexity of pregnancy conceived in violence. At the Foundation's inaugural event, Clara stood before an audience of survivors, advocates, and supporters. Her voice trembled, not with fear, but with conviction. "I want women to know they are not alone. Whether they choose to carry a pregnancy or they choose another path, their choice is valid. Their life is not over. Healing is possible, even when the world tries to convince you otherwise. My story is not just about shame and pain. It is about survival, of reclaiming dignity, and of discovering that love is stronger than the darkest night." The foundation blossomed into a beacon of hope. It provided free counseling, legal aid, medical assistance, safe housing, and financial support to survivors. Women who once felt voiceless now had an advocate. Lives shattered by trauma found pathways toward rebuilding. Clara's personal tragedy became the catalyst for hundreds of women to reclaim their futures. And as she tucked Sophia into bed at night, Clara would often whisper promises into the quiet, promises that her daughter would grow up in a world where silence was no longer the only option, where survivors stood tall, and where love could triumph over violence. Sophia, with her radiant smile and her mother's eyes, became the daily reminder that even from the most horrific circumstances, new beginnings could flourish. She was not a scar, she was a crown, a living testament to her mother's courage and her father's love. Clara's story was no longer just about betrayal and pain. It had become about resilience,
transformation, and the power of turning wounds into wings.